Hello golfers, this is the second in the series of my posts of expert opinions on pressure traces, this time for long drivers. I will explain what the experts believe are the important traces to see for long drivers, and I will also explain some of the biomechanical aspects of those traces. Firstly, a special thanks to V1 Sports for their weekly webinars. This one titled Tuesday Traces with Jamie Sadlowski that you can find on YouTube. Thank you to Mandy Von Seef of V1 Sports, to Terry Hashimoto of BODITRAK, who has many years of expertise in reading pressure traces, to Dr. Peter Mackay, sports chiropractor par excellence, and to Jamie Sadlowski, famous long driver, now trying to compete on the regular tour. Terry explains that most long drivers exhibit a Z trace, and you can watch the video of the webinar to learn more. I would like to explain the traces based on a golfer's center of mass and center of pressure, as I've studied those topics ad nauseum during my PhD biomechanics coursework. The body's center of mass is a position. It is the summation of the position of center of mass of each body segment, and it is not the same all the time because it is posture dependent. When I move a large body segment, I shift more mass towards that side. So, if I side bend or laterally flex to my left, my center of mass will move to the left considerably because the trunk has a large portion of the body's total mass. If I move my arm to the right, the center of mass will shift to the right but only slightly. My center of pressure, on the other hand, is what a pressure mat measures. It shows how hard I'm pushing down into the ground. So it does to an extent indicate where my mass is because I can push down into the ground through one foot with greater force if I'm leaning that way. However, it is also an indication of the body's neurological response because the human central nervous system will always try to stabilize the body for any intended movement. For golf, the neurological response will position the lower body suitably for any intended changes in upper body position. And that lower body adjustment is what we can measure through pressure mapping. So mainly I'm going to discuss the effect of trunk lateral flexion on the overall center of mass location. From this chart, you can see how much mass the upper trunk from neck to the base of the ribs has and the abdomen has as a percent of total body mass, and how its change in position will change the location of the whole body's center of mass. Also, I'll discuss how the center of pressure might change as the body adjusts its balance. Both can be indicated to some extent on a pressure mat. First, I will discuss Kyle Berkshire's trace because Terry tells us that is an ideal long drive trace based on his many years of experience. As Terry says, it is important to have pressure shifted onto the forward foot at impact. It is important for both distance and, although long drivers may not care, for direction. If you look at the position where Berkshire's lead arm is horizontal during the downswing, his pressure is fairly far forward, and then within just a few milliseconds during which his hands may move about a foot, his pressure is on his trail side. What has happened? First, the central nervous system has moved the lower body and thus the pressure forward to provide a stable base. Then the trail shoulder has increased its amount of lateral flexion and thus shifted a considerable amount of his weight or center of mass back. That movement to me is a concern because he now has to have perfect timing to move his mass forward in the few remaining milliseconds to impact. I would recommend much less lateral flexion of the lead shoulder for Berkshire during the backswing. That way, he would not have to drop his trail shoulder down so dramatically during the downswing, which positions his pressure so far back just prior to impact. Now, Sadlowski at the top of his backswing has his pressure way back. but immediately during transition, pressure is fully on his front foot, and finally, at impact, he hangs back. What is happening is that from the top of his super long backswing, his body is repositioning its balance so that it can support his upper body's intended downswing motion. Then, by the time he has done the excessive work required to drop his arms and upper trunk down on the trail side, it is too late to shift weight forwards and he hangs back until impact. His excessive backswing length creates a restriction, as Terry might phrase it, and his early body motion prioritizes balance over the desired weight shift to such an extent that it is too late to shift weight forward in time for impact. So, can one simply tell him to shorten his backswing or slow it down? He has already tried those things without much success. Additionally, as Dr. Mackay correctly says, it is not easy to simply tell a person to shorten his backswing. So, what would Sadlowski's solution be? To position his head and trunk with a very slight trail side lateral flexion before the backswing begins and maintain it there during the backswing, which would act as a physical barrier to his overswinging. In general, the movement of the upper trunk can cause excessive changes in center of mass positions and thus in the response of the body to stabilize its foundation to compensate. Reduced upper trunk lateral flexion during the backswing and thus during the downswing might be the key for all skill levels of golfers.